My name is Bruk. I was born in Lodz, Poland at the end of 1924, December to be exact. I come from a family of 7 children and my parents. I was born there. My parents were rather Orthodox Hasidic, and in Europe, if the parents were Hasidic and Orthodox, the children, particularly the sons, they followed the wishes of the parents or the father. We did go together to temple. We came home, we had meals together. It was rather a cohesive relation. If I remember, my father used always to sit at the meal at the head of the table. My mothers and sisters on one side, the sons on the other side. Me being the youngest one, I was sitting at the end of the table. We had rather a food and a decent living was not a problem in my family.
What did your dad do for a living?
My father was a businessman. He had a representation of, there was a big factory from silk owned by an Italian company in Tomaszów outside of Lodz. And he was getting the representation for Lodz, and he was selling the raw silk for making whether blouses and ties and whatever. And I remember that my father used to go out, and the way he did business was in a shake of a hand. This is what it was, and no agreement or writing of any business transaction took place. It was just your word, and that's all that mattered. This we went on. We were a middle-class family, maybe a little bit to the upper middle class, although we were 9 people and we lived in 2 rooms and a kitchen, but it was always very neat.
You started school, you were about 7 years old, I think you told me.
Yes, school started in Poland, 7 years of age. And I went to school in Lodz, and mainly we had 6 days a week. The basic education was 7 grades public. They were naturally high schools and higher schools of education, but either you had to be well-to-do, quite well-to-do, or absolutely brilliant to be able to get in through a grant of the Jewish community. Otherwise, this was just 7 grades for the finish. But in my case, it was the war broke out, and I finished the 7th grade in 1939, and the war started.
How early were you aware that there was this danger from the Nazis? How young were you?
Well, I was about 8 or 9 years of age, and I read quite a lot of papers and publications. I was interested in it. I was interested in world happenings, what was going on in the world at a very early age, because in our house there came in quite a lot of literature and books of various kind. To name a few, if I still remember, was like a Maxim Gorky and a Roman Roland and Nud Hampson, and quite a few other ones, which right at present I do not remember, but there was quite a variety. And me being a kid, I was interested. I just picked some of them up, lay down on the couch and was reading. Some of it, sometimes I finished the book and sometimes I just didn't.
What about news?
In news, this was a daily routine. absolutely a daily routine. That the papers, there was a paper every day. There was when Lodz went out, a Jewish paper was the Tageblatt. And then also in Warsaw, they came in every day, the Hind and the Moment to Lodz. But this was like a ritual in our house. There had to be these three papers. There was also papers written in Polish, but there were also Jewish publications. Yes, Przegląd, Nasz Przegląd. There was a paper also, but in Polish written.
Did you discuss the political situation?
Yes, we in my parents' house we discussed quite a lot of everything. The happenings in the world, the situation at that time, what's happening in Germany. We were quite aware of it. It was like fearsome, but nevertheless, we thought that we are quite far away from it. After all, this is happening in Germany. As early as 1933 or 34 or 35, they started to send in Jews back to Poland, and a lot of them came to Lodz. I remember vividly then. They were not born in Germany, but they used to go from Poland to Germany, and because they were not born in Germany, they sent them out to Poland back. And there was quite a lot of problems in it. They had to find some lodgings for these families. In Germany, they were well-to-do, rather to the standard of living in Poland. And I remember we opened up kitchens. The Jewish community opened up kitchens. They call it Neusen Lechem, give bread. And this was in a very early stage, in the early 30s, and we were quite aware of it. And they started to tell the stories what's going on in Germany. But it was incomprehensible to understand excuse me, what actually happening.
When did you first feel it yourself, personally?
I personally felt it in Poland, other than the world situation, because the anti-Semitism in Poland was absolutely tremendous. I particularly felt it a little bit more because while being from an Orthodox family and wearing the different attire than the average public, I was just going out and a few blocks away where I used to live, and I got beaten up quite a lot, and was calling dirty names and all kind of things, and quite beaten up. This what I was aware in a very early age. It's a matter of fact that I was so distraught, and I didn't like it, and I just didn't want to stay there. I wanted to go away. I wanted just to leave anywhere, although we had a family, and we wouldn't even think of leaving the family. A child should leave the rest of the family and go somewhere else, or even to another city. This cohesiveness was tremendous, where that it would have been good later on or not. Nevertheless, that's what we did in my parents' house. The situation was almost unbearable. As a matter of fact, I had a friend, a next neighbor, and we as kids we said that we want to run away. So we ran away to America. So we went and we took some bread, and we dried it, and we hid it in a sack, and we were going to go to Gdańsk, where the port was. Just walk and go, hitch a ride. So we went on this. We took the sack of bread. We were kids, and we went as we started to walk. We didn't tell our parents, and we started to walk from our house, which was like at number 23, to there was a big church. I would say about a half an hour later, a half a mile. So we got hungry. We knew we had bread in this sack, so we sat down and we finished the bread. So we had to go back home.
How old were you then?
About 7, 8 years of age.
Oh, very early.
What happened when the war broke out? You had just finished school?
I had finished school in 1939 when the war broke out.
Yeah.
And then we were living where they created the ghetto. This was in the late 1939, they gave an order that all the Jews from the outlying area, it was quite a sprawling city, they have to move in this and this and this area. There were no barbed wires at that time. So people started to take, it was absolute bedlam with packages and carriages and roshkes and the carriages with babies going into the ghetto, to the area, where before in this area where the ghetto was probably about between 100 and 150,000 Jews. Now it had to come in close to 300,000. And where to put him? So you just went and you took him in. My mother's sister, her husband, and 5 children came. They lived outside of the ghetto. They came into our house. My mother had an older brother and their children, and they came into our house. So from my sister, she was married, and she had a baby, a small baby. She lived outside of the ghetto. Naturally, she came into our house. We had some close to 30 or more people in 2 rooms and a kitchen, and there was no complaining. I slept, my brothers and I slept, we had a dining room. Well, in my imagination, that time it was large, and there was a big table where 9 people had to sit, and also some people who came from the temple, that poor people that we took home for a meal. We were sleeping, the 3 of us, my 3 brothers, on the table, and I was very restless. So I was tossing and turning and so on, and I fell off in the middle of the night while we had about 30 or more people, and people got afraid. They didn't know what happened. I fell off the table onto the floor. Naturally, went back to sleep. And this was going on for quite a few weeks until some order was brought by some of the Jewish leaders, which they were put in to run the affairs of the ghetto. After this, about in November, they started to bring in also people from Kalish and the surrounding areas. I'll never forget that it was there was a curfew at 6 o'clock each, and all the Jews had to be in there inside. One was cut 1 minute after 6 was shut. So about 5 minutes to 6, and I had to be everywhere. And I was staying outside of this house, where the apartment house we were living. There's passing by a man with glasses, with a fur coat, with they call it a vidra collar, and a baby in a carriage, and another a child holding on to the carriage, a wife, and a mother. I don't remember whose mother it was, whether the husband's or the wife's, and I heard him saying, "Where we're going to go?" And in another 10 minutes, they're going to shoot us. So I didn't think twice. I didn't ask my parents, and I said in Yiddish, "Kim mit mir." We were living on the 2nd floor. I took the carriage on one side and he on the other side, and we came in. And I said to my parents, "They don't have way to go." There was no question. We cleaned out the kitchen, which it was narrow, and we gave him for the whole family the kitchen, at least for the first night. And there were all the relatives over there. Well, they stayed till the first day of Passover in 1940, which it was quite a few months. They didn't have where to go. There was no housing. There was no way to absorb all these people in this area. When we found for these people, a place, near the cemetery, an old cemetery, and we helped them move. It was Erev Pesach in 1940, but at that time there were already the barbed wires all over. You could still somehow have walked out through an open door. They had every few hundred feet or so, they had like one door, and they had a soldier or an assessment staying watch. But it was still movement in and out somehow. And at that time I learned the people's name were Goldman. And he was a wholesaler of foods, institutional foods he delivered to hospitals and stores and whatever. Quite well-to-do people, but they chased him out from lynches, I think. They came here. We naturally became very good friends. And Erev Pesach, we still had borscht, which we put in for Pesach in a big bottle. At that time in 1940, still, as I told you, there was still some movement in and out, and we took some matzahs, and we took some borscht, and we took certain things while we transported them with the few things they had to this apartment. And we also took some of the food that they should have for the Passover, for the sick.
How did you keep busy? What did you do personally during this period?
Well, up till the ghetto was closed in 1940, May the 1st, to be exact, it was the last day of Passover. The ghetto was closed, hermetically closed. You couldn't go up to 3 feet from the wires. The sooner you stepped a little bit, 1 inch more, they shoot you. And we were living in a very dangerous area because the house where we were living in was right in the front of the barbed wire. And on the other side of the street was also barbed wire, and they made a bridge to cross over from one part on the other. And in the center, why they did this was because it was a main thoroughfare cutting through the city, and their streetcars were running. So they couldn't somehow stop the traffic of the streetcar for the rest of the population. Going from one end of the city to another end of the city to go toward Warsaw, you had to go through this street, and to go to Sgerj and Ozarkov and so further west, you had to go to the streetcars and the traffic. The ghetto was closed up, and then the problems start to increase. At least before you could have managed maybe to get a little food, but now you had to be dependent of what the authorities, what they brought in the ghetto, and what the authorities distributed. Some people probably had a little bit more. We were always brought up, and my father was always preaching that you have to be an upright person, respectable. Although he was feeding many people which they were in need before that.
Did you have a way to get food?
Not then. When the ghetto was closed, it was only we had to be dependent on what we got.
And what did you
It was a little bit more than later. There was still a little bit more than later.
What were you getting then?
Well, we were getting the ration of bread. We were getting the ration of potato. We were getting, of course, meat was very little. Even if we would have gotten the meat, my parents probably wouldn't eat it. But it came, and this went on to about at the end of 1940. In December of 1940, my 2 brothers, Sal and Jack, were taken out to build the famous Autobahn in Germany. Okay, we didn't hear from them in 1940. They were in one camp, in another camp. As they moved up, as they moved with the Autobahn, they moved them with camps. in 1941, they had started, in the beginning of 1941, they started to have decrees. My brother-in-law, I had only one sister married, the oldest one, and they had a baby. Baby was born either in 1939. And then we found for my sister, right not far from us, an apartment. It probably wasn't bigger than that, but nevertheless, that you had to where to lay your head. And he somehow got a job where they did distribute potatoes. They brought in potatoes and they did distribute potatoes. This was in 1941. And there were, his wife and the child was very hungry. I don't remember the exact the day or the month, and he decided that he took a few potatoes in his pocket to take home. Well, they caught him, and they put him right away on a list. A few months later, he was on the list. They brought in more people rather than take out many. And while being on the list, they had to have somebody to get. This is already the Germans required, or they asked for people, and the Jewish community or the Jewish leaders, there was some costly on top. He said, well, first of all, we have to see the undesirables. Somebody stole. And they accumulated whether they needed 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000. Naturally, they had to go with the families. But it took a long time till they took him. They took him to, if my recollection is correct, it was about in the beginning of 1942. Of course, they're not around. In 1941, and going to 1942, the food situation became very acute.
What was happening to you during that period?
Well, I became a mechanic. It was very necessary to have some profession and to be working. Otherwise, at any whims or whims, they took the people who didn't work and the people that had red hair or the people for something else. But if you were working and you had a job, they thought that you are useful for something. So a friend of mine, his brother was the director of the sewing machine, the mechanics, and he got me in there they call it protection. He got me in there. And I started to work, so naturally they didn't touch me. And they didn't touch already the rest of the family. You didn't get any more food than that, but at least you know that if you work, you got the rations. If you didn't work, they didn't give you the rations. And it was everything, whoever, my three sisters were working. One was working to make saddles for horses in a factory. The other one was, the other two sisters were working in another factory, I don't remember on what, and there started to spring up a lot of factories in the dozens, big, huge factories, and this was all
inside the ghetto.
In the ghetto. There was the leader of the ghetto in the German, his name was Bebov, Hans Bebov, and he was a brother-in-law of Himmler. And he saw the potential of making fortunes of money. You're having a few 100,000 people to work in factory, paying them nothing, and you think, of course, he got probably contracts from the German army and the authorities, and here you have people slaving away from 6 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night for giving them food for probably for a few cents. And this was probably the most important ghetto in production for the German army was a lodge, which they called Litzmannstadt. In 1942, it became very. Then they started in 1942. They started to take out a lot of people for absolutely no reasons. 5,000 today, 7,000 tomorrow, or 15,000, and whether the children from 3 to 15, or older one from 40 to 60. And they were cleaning almost every day. They cleaned out, so they said it's going to be a resettlement. They said, what are they going to do with you? They're going to take you, and they said they're going to be resettled and work in another place. So if you work here, you work there, maybe people said you're going to have more food. Well, we didn't know anything about it, because there was no newspaper, there was no radio, there was no anything, because if you had a newspaper and it came from out of town and they caught you, you're shot. A radio was absolutely impossible. Maybe there were some hidden, but people who did it took their own life in their hand. There were rumors of certain happenings. They said from here, and they heard from the English, the news, but it was only rumors. Maybe there were some, and you had to get from 10th hand. The hunger became quite acute, and the matter of fact, at that time they started to bring in some horse meat, whether the horses were killed in the battles or whatever. They became in horse meat, and you got a ration of horse meat. I never ate horse meat in my life before, so you got the few ounces or pound or whatever horse meat. My parents wouldn't eat it. Well, we couldn't resist it because the hunger started to become very great, so we cooked it. And whether you put in a potato in it or whatever, and we ate it. At first we were ashamed for the next neighbor. After this you weren't ashamed anymore. A little bit later on you would have given your life and anything you had for a piece of horse meat, just to sustain you, because it is almost impossible to understand when a human being is hungry. The pain and the pang is indescribable.
When did things get worse for you? When did they? Because at first you were getting the horse meat and you were getting some potatoes, and I think you had mentioned that in 1943 things really got bad for you.
At the end of 1942, in the beginning of 1943, there were almost daily and weekly transports. They accelerated it that fast, and they started to take anybody in sight. They didn't touch the people who worked in the factories. This was the last. Whether you were sick or you were tall for one reason or another, they had to have a quota, and they had to send out. And there was all kind of rumors that came in, trainloads of clothes to wash and repair, and they were bloody. And some of these clothes, some of the people recognized some of the clothes in the factory, said they just left a few days ago. Now where did they take him? They said they're taking him to the east, in other factories to work. Now how is it possible? They're starting a lot of questioning. It started. But again, who in the world would ever want to believe or think about it that people are being annihilated? That you take men, women, and children, sick or healthy, and you just annihilate them. It would be as far removed from a person's mind as the Mars. But the rumor started to persist, and the ghetto started to become small in population. They brought in, but they even ran out of people to bring in from the smaller towns. What they did in the smaller towns, not only did they bring them in already to the larger ghetto, they only brought in the one they wanted to, or the healthy or the young, to work at a certain time, but they just sent them somewhere else. And then we heard rumors that the war doesn't go too good for the Germans in Russia. They were stopped somewhere. We didn't hear where, but somewhere. And especially we were living in this front street, and we saw the movement of military trucks and cannons going back day and night and day and night. If they had a setback, they became absolutely more vicious and more demanding and more people, the acceleration. We heard it was toward the spring of 1943, we had cannons shooting. Well, we didn't know from where. They said that there's a fight. There were rumors. Everything was rumors. There's a fight going on in Warsaw. I didn't hear about that the Warsaw ghetto is fighting, or in Warsaw, but there was some fighting. So I said, well, what are you going to do? You think that they're going to fight Hitler? When he conquered almost all of Europe? Again, it was rumors. My parents and I, they grabbed us, including myself, while I was working as a mechanic. Excuse me. And this was a day or two before Passover in 1943. And they took us into jail. It was a big jail in the ghetto, near the transport which they were leaving from it was Marashin called. Over there the transport, the trains came in, and from there the transport left. But they had to take the people to a Sammelpunkt, rather to a
assembly point.
Assembly point. My father, there was times in the ghetto that you, from hunger, started to swell the ankles, some people. And then it moved up in the legs. And then they moved up higher into the stomach, a lot of them. And then it came to the heart, and thousands of people you have seen going in the ghetto, people with swollen feet, walking. And we knew already, well, he is ready for the cemetery. There was talk. We wound up the Erev Pesach in Marashin, in a huge hall from the ghetto, from the Sammelpunkt, and they sammeled us to this point to be put on the trains. And it took a whole day. There was a transport of 5,000 people. My father was there. He was, as I mentioned, he had already swollen legs. And my father was always, he wasn't heavy, but he liked the food. He liked food. And the hunger was so acute, more to him than anybody else. And while even being hungry and starving,
I'd like to talk about it.
He was so vehement, and he was such a pathos. He said, "We are going to survive Hitler."
You did.
We must survive Hitler. This is a must. This you mach shmoynik, he said. We must survive him. And he will have to account for mankind, to mankind what he is doing, to innocent people, with such an unshakable belief that we are going to survive this, that it was almost unreal. He had such a passion of surviving, if nothing else. One day after, if he would have seen the end of Hitler, would have been enough. Well, this evening, which it was Erev Pesach, in 1943, we were laying there with the bundles and so on. It was around 12 o'clock at night. In Poland, at that time of the year, it's very bitterly cold. There's still a lot of snow and ice and so on. Of course, you couldn't go out because from this barracks, well, the Germans somehow grabbed 93 more people than they needed. If they wanted 5,000, they wouldn't take 501. The Pinklerkeit. So they found out they had 93 more people. And it was at exactly 12 at night. And my father was laying on the floor. He couldn't move already. And my 3 sisters and my mother. And in came in a few German officers, the SS, with boots, and they stopped. One stops tall SS officer stops right near me. When a SS soldier, an officer, or whatever, when he came to you, you had to stay to attention and take off your cap right away. That's what you had to do. So my father couldn't stand up. My sisters couldn't stand up. My mother, I stood up. I probably stretched myself I was probably 10 feet tall at that time. And he asked me in German, "Was ist deine Beruf? What is your profession?" I strongly, with a voice, I said, "I am a sewing machine mechanic. I'm a Nähmaschinenmechaniker." And in German he said, he asked me, "Wer ist deine Familie?" So I told him, and heraus, he yelled on top of his lungs. So I took my father under my arm. My sisters and my mother walked out, and it was so bitterly cold outside at 12 o'clock at night. We came out, there were some people already there, out of the people from this 93. Now, I certainly believe that this is a miracle. We were staying for about a half an hour or an hour, I don't remember how long, and they said, we have to march back to the jail. The jail wasn't far, maybe a half a mile or so from this Marachine. And my father couldn't walk, and I was afraid that if we stay a little bit longer, they may decide to take us. You know, we were very much afraid. So I took him on my body, on my shoulder, and I carried him. And we came into the jail, and I put him down on the floor. In the morning, the Jewish police of the ghetto came, and they said we can go back into the ghetto to release us. When we came in where we were living, of the rooms, there were already a seal from the Jewish community, and they took all the furniture out. What we had, it was empty. In 2 days, and they took it to a warehouse. We put my father in the front, on the hallway, in the door, and it was Passover, first day of Passover. My father knew before the war everybody, whoever was who in the city. He did business with him. We were in a temple, and for many years he knew a lot of people through business, and we were a very large family in Poland. We were numbering in between my father's side and my mother in the hundreds, literally. So my sister ran to somebody, a relative who we knew, Yitzhak Blaugrund was his name, and he wasn't a macher, an official, but he was a big industrialist before the war, and this Romkowski came to him to get money there was an orphanage that he was taking care of, Romkowski. So he knew him. So he had some privileges. After about a half a day, they came and they opened the seal, because you wouldn't dare to break the seal. They opened the seal, and somehow we got the few things back, and we put them in. Well, this was to hold through Passover. We hardly had anything, so we wanted to go around to somebody to get some food. So my father said, "You are not going to stop you're not going to schnurren. You're not going to back. This is not right. A man who helped that many hungry people. He knew who was hungry before, and he knew who needed, and he was there. All his life. Didn't let us go and ask for a few potatoes. You didn't get out of bed already. There were almost nothing to eat. And it went on a week, and he was laying in bed. And it was a few days before Shavuot already. I came home from work. We all think I did. I laid my head down. Was sitting on a chair and laid my head down on the table and lay there for hours, just dreaming away about remembering before the Saturdays, the meals, the smells, the family life. My father's yelling, "Bear," she said, "give me something to eat." I said, "There's nothing in the house, absolutely nothing." He said, "So give me a piece of paper to chew." This the same night, he passed away. This was a few days before Shavuot. A man who the welfare of the next person was more important than his own had to die from hunger. Well, I remember we put him, the custom in Poland with Orthodox Jewry was to put him down on a board on the floor. I remember in the morning we were on, he had a best friend, and he was a Rosh Yeshiva from a yeshiva, Bible Bugaya, one of probably one of the righteous of the world, not through piousness, but for decency. And he helped this man before the war. He was babying him. He had to know when he has his first meal and when he couldn't pay rent, and when they threw out the few things that he didn't pay rent, and he got the money and he went and he put it back into the house. He came the first. He didn't cry, but he only said a few words. This is going to stay for the rest of my life. Well, the funeral was taking place. Took him out. The cemetery was in the ghetto, big one. I went there and I made a mental note where he was laying. Imagine in the ghetto. We got the privilege to have my father buried right near the Radishitzer Rebbe, which it was something unusual. You probably heard about the Radishitzer Rebbe. He was a sage, and he was laying about 3 graves away from the Radishitzer. This is what I remembered. Well, then it started, this was in 43 in the summer, it was absolutely to get a slaughterhouse. An absolute slaughterhouse. Every day, every few days, children 5,000. It was absolutely horrible. And the mothers and the parents didn't want to give their small children. So they came in on our house, which it was, Europe has, it was always like that, have a hoif, it is like a backyard.
A courtyard.
Yeah, a courtyard. Never forget it, they came in, a flat truck, open. And when we saw these SS, they were wearing a dark beige uniform, hairy, with a fatigue hat, and on the fatigue hat they had a what do you call it, a totem hat, what do you call it, like from the SS, the
Skull.
the skull, yeah. And we knew them, that these are the real McCoys. When we saw them, something bad is going to happen. They were so vicious, they were so ruthless. When we saw them coming in to take the people, we knew that it's bad. Naturally, everybody was hiding with the children because they wanted either 10 or 12,000. So they started to grab whomever they found. The older ones were afraid too. I took my mother on the 4th floor. Before the war, it was an attic where you wash clothes, you should dry. And there was a ladder to go up there. I took my mother, first of all, and I brought her up there, and I took away the ladder to like a manhole. Then there was a woman, and she came out, she must have been about 75, 80 years old, and she started to yell, "You hide me too, otherwise I'm going to tell where your mother is." She was frantic. It looks like everybody wants to live, however old one is. I took her back on the 4th floor, put on the ladder in the last minute, took her up on my shoulder, and I brought her up there, and I took away the ladder. Well, they didn't find them, but they took a lot of kids, and they were yelling and screaming on this open truck, and a lot of mothers jumped on the truck with the children. They wouldn't just let them go by themselves. And they took off, and this was going on for about 2 or 3 days. They call it the Schwere. You couldn't go out when they had to get a transport, because it was easier for them to go into the houses. Well, that's what that. About a week later, I heard a rumor that they're cleaning out the hospital. There was one hospital not far from us, Lagivnitska, 36. There was a hospital before the war there. And I heard a rumor that they're cleaning out the hospital. Well, I have to go and see what's happening, because it wasn't far. I ran over there, and I see the whole area is surrounded in the hospital. People went in to visit somebody, give birth, a toothache, whatever. They didn't let anybody out. And there were a lot of children over there. And I was staying about 100 feet away. And I saw there were huge trucks with high walls on the side. And they were chasing out people from this hospital onto the trucks. And while I'm staying there on the side and looking, I see something is falling from the window. I saw children. Children that threw out. They threw out children from the window. Who can believe that? Some of them did fall in the trucks. Some of them fell beside the truck on the concrete. I got berserk. I ran. I didn't know where. I ran back. And I said, I saw children flying to the window from the hospital. My mother says, Beirish, bist mich sugar? Are you crazy? What do you mean? I said, I saw it. Now, I don't know how convincing I was. They didn't believe me. Well, when the hospital was cleaned out, everybody knew already what was happening. This thing haunts me. If I forget, if I don't talk about it, it isn't there. But it just haunts me. It just can't get it out of my mind. To take children and throw them out from a window from a hospital. After this, they had another sperra. The sperra lasted also in 43. It was late in the summer, July, August. Lasted about 3 weeks. They had to have certain people of a certain amount. Now, I don't know if the people themselves, if they started to get wind what's happening. When you clean out a hospital and you throw children out of the window, and you find out then what are they doing with the people who they took with the transport before, and you see bloody clothes, hey, something is not right. People started to realize what's happening. And a lot of people, when they came and they got that they have to put themselves voluntarily for the transport, they didn't show up. So naturally, I would assume that the Germans went over to the Jewish community, to Romkoskin, and they said, now you get them, or else. Well, in 3 weeks' time, over 10,000 people died from hunger in the beds. You should have seen what was happening after the sperra was over. It was like a procession of bodies. And they call him, there was a undertaker, one in Lodz, they call him Moshe Tzitzel. He had a little word here. He said, well, Moshe Tzitzel is busy like never before. Over 10,000 people in the beds in 3 weeks. Well, they came, if I can retract a little bit, the hunger was so great that in this court there was cobblestones. And I decided, my friend Yossel Rosen, who through his brother I became a mechanic, he and I, that we're going to tear out these cobblestones, till the ground, and put in something. You could have gotten from the Jewish community some seeds. Mainly, they had some seeds for beets, red beets. And I was told that red beets grow fast. We worked day and night after work, carrying water from about a half a mile away with pails, taking the human the excrement and fattening it up and so on. And we seeded this, and we were washing, and we were tilling and so on until it came into the fall. They came out first came out the leaves. Mm-hmm. So we knew that from the leaves, first of all, if we cut them off, we can cook them. And they're edible and they're good. And then, and also that the beets are going to grow bigger and faster if you cut off the leaves. We did so. We sustained ourselves with the leaves. What we didn't do out of these leaves, you smelled herring and fish and everything. Until it came, the red beets started already to grow. and I was watching it that some people shouldn't steal. So you have hungry people, and I had one night to watch through the window, and the next night, my friend. And one night I hear some commotion, and it's, you lay and you work the whole day, and you fall asleep. I fall asleep at the window looking out. I hear some commotion I take a look. A Jewish policeman went and he started to tear out the beads. So I started to yell. I caught him red-handed. And I ran down. And he wants to arrest me, to take me to the police. He threw it away, and that I accused him that he took some of the beads. Well, the second time, his name was Gedala Rosen, my friend's the brother, came to the rescue. If they would have taken me to the jail, I wouldn't be here. He had some authority, and he went over to him. He said in Yiddish, everything was in Yiddish, you let him go. And somehow the policemen were afraid for his authority, and he let me go. So we took out at the end of the year, toward the end of the year, some of the Bruk is what they call, the red beads, and we sustained ourselves a little bit at a time. It was like diamonds. Then came 1944, beginning. My sister, the youngest of the sisters, got married to a man in the ghetto after my father died. And they were living right above us. And in between, we were living there for many years. So when we were living before the war, quite a few years before, there was only 2 stories high. 2 stories high. Then they built up a third one, and there was an attic, and they got higher. They didn't cut it down to size, but there was an attic between the second and the third story, and we knew about it. So while they were living up on the 3rd floor above us, my sister and brother-in-law, my brother-in-law decided in 1944, but the transport was absolutely almost daily. He decided he is going to cut out on his floor a piece of very nicely cut it out, that in an emergency we will hide in between, in this attic, between our ceiling and their floor. It must have been about 3 feet high, 4 feet high, something like this. And this is what he did. And when they started to take, almost at random, block by block, they went house by house and block by block many times. We ran in there, we hid ourselves, and also a few neighbors came. They knew about it, and they came to hide. And what we did, he took a valise with clothes and put underneath like a piece of wood that if we will go in, we threw out the clothes on the floor like somebody was here, and underneath we turned this wood that they should hold the valise tight. And there must have been there about 20 people until we heard that the Germans who were looking for the people, whomever they didn't catch, we went out. And this went out a few times.
You survived then until they finally liquidated it.
Until they finally liquidated it in 1944.
Mm-hmm. Right.
They gave us a half a loaf of bread for every person before we went on the trains. Said it's going to take a time. They put us in maybe 70 or 80 or 90 in the cattle cars and hermetically closed, and they put in some pails for the latrine. And we were going and going and writing, and we passed by cities with names which I heard and I remembered. Where in the world are we going? We're supposed to have gone east. It looks like we are going somewhere west. Where are we going? People from fright, they got diarrhea. Some people ate the whole bread. Some people said, if I'm going to die, once I want to have a full stomach and not to feel the pain of hunger. But the worst thing in these cars was the humiliation. You had to go to the bathroom. There was nothing to hide in the front of men, women, and children. It was absolutely degrading. You had to go and sit down on a pail without a cover, without anything, men or women. This was absolutely unbearable, and the stench. And the people from fright vomited. There was no water. I don't remember whether it took 2 days or 3 days until we came to the destination. When they open up the door, I see Auschwitz, or Schwänchen, Auschwitz. Thousands of people barking and yelling in dogs and assessment. And on the other side, when we went down on the ramps, they chased everybody out, and we were holding my mother, my 3 sisters together. Absolutely bedlam. But we were already happy that we are out of these wagons. And on the other side, they were digging ditches, and we saw some people with stripe suits, and with around the heads with stripes. And they're yelling to us. They were working with the shovels, digging some ditches or whatever, doing, and they were yelling in Yiddish, "Es geht in Himmel, you're going to heaven." Going to heaven. You look like they would be crazy. Heaven. Nobody even took notice. And they started to chase out. The people elderly couldn't get out of it. Heraus, fast. And they started to incite the dogs. And the people got frightened, and they ran out as fast as they could, and we lined up. And at the front is staying a sea of humanity. Not only that our train came, but other trains from somewhere else. And there was staying a lot of assessment. And there was a table. And they were laughing and joking and so on. All of a sudden, one goes over and says, "Achtung!" Everybody straightened himself out. And some man came over with a little stick with breeches and big boots. I don't know who he was, and he was staying there. And it was this way, that way, this way, that way. And from away, I seen some tall chimneys like a factory. And like a green smoke is coming out. We didn't know what it was. Being there, we didn't know what it was. And we looked. And it come that you come to the front more and more. My 3 sisters and my mother staying. And she was 57 years of age. Of course, she was hungry for so many years. She had fallen in cheeks, and she was skinny. And this assessment shows with the stick this way. Well, we didn't know this way or that way. The only thing of tearing apart the 3 daughters and myself to the other side. So she was staying dumbfounded, with her hands stretched out. She didn't utter a word. Not one word. She was staying there, helpless. And I wanted to go over and take my mother back to be together. I got a kick in my back with a boot. Du verfluchter Hund. You dirty dog, or whatever. And the sea of humanity keeps on, and she is just pushing back as she turns around. Just absolutely dumbfounded. What is going on here? About a minute or two later, I just got blacked out. I didn't faint, but I just got, like, everything turned dark. I thought that it's 12 o'clock at night. And my three sisters and I were holding on. The sea of humanity pushed my mother and the other people on the other side, I don't know where. And we were on the other side and starting to march, and we were holding on. But I didn't see until I came to a barrack. At that time, in this barrack, they still had all the other ones, which they went to the right, were men and women together. And we were there together. At that time, it must have been about a mile from the ramp into this barrack in the rear, a mile or maybe more than a mile. I caught completely. I was walking. They held me. They didn't know. I couldn't see nothing. It was black, pitch black. Well, we came into this barrack, and there were thousands of, tens of thousands of people. Water! Everybody's running. Water! The heat at that time of the year, and it's in the mountains, is very strong, very humid. It was unbearable. People were fainting and dying. There was no water. And I look out, and right in the front of the barrack there is, on top is staying a sentry with a machine gun, and on the other side a sentry with a machine gun. After about a half an hour, everybody started to yell water. So I saw some of these with the striped suits, which were there before. I heard them calling Canada, Canada. These people, they called them Canada. And I saw them carrying some pails of water. They were going to bring it into this sea of humanity. I was just reckless. I didn't think what I was doing. My sisters are yelling, water. I am water. Some acquaintances, we knew they had water. I just ran over to one of them, outside, and the sentry was watching, and I grabbed the pail of water and ran back into the barracks. Of course, we didn't have any utensils or anything. You drink like a horse. Whoever could grab a little bit of water. We were staying there about an hour and a half. Men and women separate. You're going to take a bath. And even then, I did not know what it means a bath and what it means to shower and what it means to gas. I didn't know. We didn't know. If anybody says he knew, I don't think he knows what he's talking about. The only thing I heard a few of these from Canada, the guys in Himmler, you're going to heaven. Anyway, we separated the men and the women, and we go into another barrack. We had to undress completely. I mean completely. Some people they thought that they're going to have for they'll put in a diamond hidden in a coat. First of all, in this heat, before we left the ghetto, I put on 2 pair of pants. As sure what we wear, they were not going to take it off. Anyway, we took everything off. They shaved us everything. The hair everywhere. We had to open your mouth. And we went in, and I saw brass bow. I told you I knew some German. A shower. We went in there, men. We had no suspicion. It came out water. Maybe in the next hour would have come out a gas. It came out water. We washed. We went on to the other side. We thought we were going to get our clothes back. We got the striped suit. And they marched us in. This was Birkenau. Marched us in the main camp, where many barracks. There was 80,000 people there, man. Animals running around. Electrified wires. As if you saw animals. You are so bewildered. You don't know what's happening to you. And right next to these barracks where we were, we saw the chimneys. And we saw belching out day and night a green smoke, and it was smelling like searing meat. How about this? I said, see, over there they're coming out. Seeing it, I looked at it. I said, coming out where? I was under the impression it's a factory, and it's coming out the smoke. I was used to chimneys in lodge. You go into lodge, you see thousands of chimneys from the factories. Well, you had appels and appels and appels from fright. So I told you, people got diarrhea. And they had these long, in the middle of the barracks, they had long latrines open with holes. You were just sitting there, and the other ones would chase you off. And you were sitting there. You couldn't release yourself, but you were sitting there out for fright. We were designated a bunk, and there were 8 people in the bunk. The first night, there was just boards, nothing else. There was no straw or anything. It was, you were like herring. You had to lay either on one side, and if you had to turn, we had to turn altogether. Now this went on for a few days. At one time, I forgot to mention, I was with my brother-in-law, my sister's husband. We were together. And I saw them, and everyone got a little chisel, a pen, and you put it on either on a cord, it's for perpetual with you, and no spoon, just like a little pen or a piece of wire. It was life and death not to lose this when they were giving the soup. So again, I just didn't understand, and we were very hungry, and I saw that a few of these Canada, with the stripes, are carrying the big containers with soup to dish out. And my brother and I are standing, and I don't say anything. I mean, I didn't think. I just an impulse. I take off the chisel, what I had, and I run over in the front, and they're looking. They didn't know what hit them, and I went into this container, and I grabbed my chisel with the soup, and I ran in the humanity. Of course, if they would have caught me, they catch me. They have 80,000 people milling around. I got lost in this humanity. Somehow, I found my brother-in-law. He had one sip. I had one sip. He had one sip. I had one sip. On the end, we cleaned out whatever it was, the thicker one, with our hands, and we were licking it. Well, we were there 2 weeks, and coming in thousands and thousands of people, thousands. One day they are giving an announcement that they're looking for mechanics. Now, I don't know whether it is good or it is bad. I'm a mechanic, but I want to be with my brother-in-law together, and he was a tailor. I said, David, you tell him you're a mechanic too, and I taught him, if they'll ask him questions, pertaining technical questions, he should say this and this and this. So they should see that he is also a mechanic. We should be together wherever. We were staying, and they selected 400 people, and they took us out. Gave us a half a loaf of bread, black bread, and we went into trains with these stripes, and we were riding and riding and riding. And I saw, in Germany, I saw German named cities. And at one night, I saw Dresden. And they took us out, the whole train, took us out on a side, away from the main station and away from the main rails, the yards. And in the middle of the night, the bombarding was going on, and it was like daylight, like firecrackers. At that time, they had the famous raid on Dresden.
Oh, that was the night?
This was the night. Oh. On the famous raid of the Dresden, some 300,000 people got killed. In the morning, we move out, and we go again for about a day or so. All of a sudden, I see Chemnitz, and I remember Chemnitz. I told you I was always interested in geography, and I remember these names. Chemnitz, I said, my God, it's a big industrial city. They opened up. A few didn't make it. They opened up. A few died. Took them out, but they had to be counted. Even dead, they had to be laying right near us, and they had to be counted, the 400. There were mostly people from Lodz and some Hungarian Jews also, from Hungary, Budapest and so on. And we started marching in, and we came into a camp. Also with barbed wires, electrified. And from far away we see huge buildings and chimneys, factories. They counted us up. The first day we didn't do anything. We got the soup, and in the evening we got the bread. And the next morning, in Appel, we have to be up at 6 o'clock. And at about 6:15 or 6:30, we marched off to the factory. Now with the professionals. And I come into the factory. I saw a huge place with milling machines and lathes and all equipment, and they designated, and they went, the SS was with their guns right next to each one. Each had a certain spot every 5 feet or so to watch, and they told us in no uncertain terms, anybody moves out 1 inch gets shot. And they put me into a big lathe with an old man in spectacles, a German. And I go over and I look at the mill and I start to operate it, and he's staying in the side. And this when it's about 10, 11 o'clock, and I turn whatever had to be done. He comes over, it was about 10:30, 11 o'clock, and he just sheepishly comes over and he asks me, "Was machst du hier? What are you doing here?" So I thought, I'm going to tell him I'm a Jew. It'll answer all the questions. I said, "Ich bin ein Jude, I'm a Jew." "Ja, was machst du hier? What are you doing again?" I tell him again, "I'm a Jew, that's why I'm here." He says to me, "Ah, Quatsch." He says, and he says in German to me, "Die hast du deine Mutter und Vater totgeschlagen, warum bist du hier?" That I killed my mother and father, that's what they were told, and that's why we are here. They should be aware of us, because we are dangerous people. They shouldn't associate with us. I look at him. I don't know what to answer. About 12 o'clock, we're supposed to go back to the camp to get our meal. About 5 minutes at 12, the siren started to blast. So we lined up, we started up, we are going to, this was a air raid warning. And they get all together. They started to bark like the dogs, the SS. "Don't move out, you're going to be shot." And we started to run down with the steps. And they wanted to go in. There was a Schutzkeller, shelter. We sheltered a lot of people from the air raids, and the Germans, whoever were there, well, a lot of them, they didn't let us in. "We don't want this dreck." And they didn't let us in, and they chased us back to the camp. And outside in the camp, we had to make a circle, all the 400. A circle, and they told us we should not make one misstep. The assessment was surrounding us with the guns, and some of them were hiding underneath a tree, and some of them there, and all of a sudden, a combustion. We swayed, the whole 400, and literally, millions of phosphorus incendiary little bumps. When it hits it, it becomes like white around there. This is another miracle, I believe. Nobody of the 400, but nobody got a scratch. And you had the phosphorus, the bombs were probably 1 inch away. Not one hit in the midst. The assessment who was staying underneath the tree, he got hit. Another one who was staying a few feet away got hit. It's an absolute miracle. After about, when the bombardment, and they were bombarding right next, and they were bombarding this factory. We saw bombs falling on the factory. When after about an hour or so, when they got the order to move away, and we moved away, it was the most amazing thing. There was a circle. As we were staying, not one little touch within this circle was there. They marched us up to another city, Sigmaringen, which it was about 20 kilometers away, another factory. So we passed by the factory. It was rubble, absolutely rubble. We were told that this whole fallout shelter was completely, whoever was there was completely smashed to pieces. In this, when they didn't let us in. I have never seen such a mess in my life. One brick didn't stay there. Everything was smashed. They got us into Sigmaringen. There was another camp. There was another factory. And they started to salvage the machines from this factory, brought it in, we cleaned them up, we put them together. I became an electrician at that time instead of a mechanic, because we had to throw heavy wire. In Germany they work on 380 volt. And they were working day and night to take these machines, to put them in and under power. And then we had another Oberscharführer, the German. The one who was in the first camp was an absolute butcher, and he got wounded. Whether he was killed or he took him to the hospital, and we got another one, a short man, and I found out the name Gruber, Herr Gruber. And we were there and worked day and night to put this factory together. And this was already in the fall of 1944. Oh. We were working, got the food, whatever they gave it to us, and we had the stripes, the suits on. And there was all kind of rumors until it came 1945, and we were working and it was cold. It must have been in January or February, or was it March? Right near the kitchen there was a Krankenstube, which is like the hospital for these Häftlinge, and there were laying people there I knew. Some of them were working with me as mechanics. One Weisblatt, a blonde, young, very young. And then another one who was a butcher before the war. My uncle was a Scheuchet, my mother's brother, and he used to be ritual slaughtering the cows which they were selling. And he found out that I am a nephew. He just didn't know what to do with me, a tall man. And he went to the hospital. And I was passing by there, and I looked into the window, and they were laying there, and nobody brought them any food or anything. They were just fading away. Again, I got these brainstorms. In a spare of a moment, I go over to the kitchen, and I see there's staying a container of soup, about that high. I take this container of soup, and I go around there, and I go into this Krankenstube, and I took the schüssels from these sick people, and I take them, and I lift their head up, and I give them to eat. All of them. They caught me, the SS. They took me out. They called on an appel. Everyone had to stay in the snow. I was wearing the wooden shoes like they have in Holland. I had to take off this jacket and a green down shirt, and I had to roll in the snow. One way it must have been a mile long, and the other way. And while I was rolling in the snow, they kicked me and kicked me and kicked me. Who helped me? I said, nobody. And nobody did help me. They thought that because somebody, the chef or whoever was working in the kitchen, they'd help me. I said, nobody helped me. And they were kicking me. I thought my own intestines are going to come out. At the end, he barks I should get up and attention. And he asked me again, who helped me? I said, keiner hat mir geholfen. Nobody helped me. And he gave me a kick with his boots, and I should go in the ranks of these 400. I forgot all about that. When I was 2 weeks ago in Washington, all of a sudden a man comes over and he said, Bearish Bruk. I said, yes. He said, I'm Weisblach. My wife, my children, my grandchildren know about you. They never saw you. I owe you my life, he said. To the rest of my day, I'll never forget you. I owe you my life. Where is your family? I said, my wife is here, my children. I want to see them. I want to tell them. So I was staying with my brother, Sal, from Montreal. And my sister Rose from Montreal. They came into the gathering. He said, I must tell you at least. I owe him my life. I'm alive on account of him. And he grabbed me, and he kissed me, and he didn't know what to do. If it wouldn't happen just 2 weeks ago, I wouldn't even remember that. And then it came about April the 12th, and there were rumors I heard that Roosevelt died in the camp, and they put us on march, all the 400. We were marching till May the 8th, 1945, through villages, through forests. They were going with horses. They were going with horses and buggies.
Okay, let me tell you, we're going to do one more tape. So we have a few more minutes, and you can continue if you want to talk a little bit. Okay, how are you feeling now?
I'm okay.
You're doing very well, really.
Good.
Just,
This is miraculous.
it's just really
2 weeks
wonderful.
ago. 2 weeks
Just
ago, you
wonderful.
discovered
I'm not talking about myself, but
everybody.
in general.
Also did.
To be able to go through, to see this kind of butchery, to be able to shake it off, and to be able to become decent human beings, to care, to be charitable, to help the next person, not to become the animal, which we were after all.
Sure,
Most of us, we had formative years.
You did that.
You were
in the
doing
camp.
it right in the camp.
Right in the
exactly,
camp you were
right,
doing
with
it.
the soup, with those sick people.
In the formative years,
Sure.
it is absolutely the most amazing thing. I believe the foundation.
Your
was
early
there.
training.
I'm talking from younger people, children and I, what they saw in the formative years. They became decent people, married again, raised families, education, academia, whatever.
Where did you meet Celine?
After the war in Germany.
In Germany. So you both came to Canada. Did you go to Canada, the two of you?
No, I went to Canada because I just wanted.
Oh.
I've got to do this is important.
Oh, okay. All right.
Are we ready?
I don't know, are you on? Are you on? Okay, sorry.
Okay.
They put us in march, and we were day and night. And at night, either we slept in forests or in pigsties. At one night, we stayed in a small little village, and they put us all in a pigsty. And the pigs were there.
This is after you left the camp.
You know, that's when they pushed us when they were marching.
While you were marching?
Yes. Because they figured that it's easier for them to control us. They will stay outside with the guns, but in the forest some could have run away. So we went into one of the pigsties, and you didn't care where you're laying, just in everything. So about 6 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning, the farmer came in with pails of little potatoes with the slime and the dirt for the pigs. They were cooked, 2 pails of potatoes. And he threw this in the trough for the pigs. The pigs didn't get a chance in 1 second. Everybody was grabbing whatever he could. From then we went on and in forest and while we were marching, a lot of times they call them the Tiefflieger, American planes. They came in and they circled around. So we had a blanket, each had a blanket. What the blanket was in it, I don't want to mention it even. So we had a blanket on it, covering ourselves up from you were always cold. If it would have been 100 degrees, it was cold. So when the Tiefflieger came, they gave us an order we should throw off the blankets, that the pilots should see who we are. That this was already late in the spring of 1945, and we heard bombarding from here and there. They said they're 3 miles away, they're 1 mile away, they're 3 miles away, they're 1 mile. They managed to get us out somehow. They managed to get us out through a pin. They just managed it. At one morning, it came. I didn't know the date or the month or whatever. One morning, we stayed overnight in the forest. All of a sudden, we get up. There's no SS, nobody. And this was May the 8th. Nobody was there. And some people say, the SS, everything in Yiddish, the SS is not here, and maybe the war is over. Maybe the Russians are here, maybe the Americans. It started a whole lot of people. Some people were afraid to run away. It's an ambush. Some people ran away. And about an hour later, my brother-in-law and I decided we should not run with everybody because they're going to be shooting. Just he and I, running deep in the forest, and we just ran and ran and ran. We just didn't look back until we were very deep. After exhaustion, we sat down and we looked out. Far away, we saw a tank is going with a white star. Now, we didn't know what the white star means or whatever. We were sitting. He said, we are going to stay here. Otherwise, they'll kill us. We stayed till at night, and we slept over in this forest over there. And the war was over. It was already from the 8th to the 9th. So we started to venture out, and we heard yelling and screaming from the people with the striped swords, the war is over. Well, it's hard to explain the euphoria, the anxiety, and if you had a little brain to think, where are you? Who are you? You are nothing. In the midst of nowhere, you are a non-entity. You have no brothers, no sisters, no mother. You didn't know what happened to him. I knew that my father died. That's all I knew. But the rest, I didn't know. Well, we went into a village, he and I. And we could have gone into any German and he would have given us the whole house and he would walk out. We went in the barn, in the hay up there, and we were sleeping there. We were afraid. We were afraid to go out. That's all a trick. And meantime, we saw some of the young boys and so on. One is running with a pot of marmalade, the other one with sugar, the third one with butter, whatever they could have found. They ate, and all of a sudden they keel over. Many of them died. They couldn't take this. They didn't have their intestines were twisted or whatever. And my brother-in-law was older than I. He says, "You are not going to grab anything. We are going to do it slow. You're going to have a bit of soup." We went into the German there. We knew already that the war is over. We went into the German, and he gave us some soup. We didn't go into the house. It would be a shame to hurt anybody. So we went to the barn to eat there. After all, who were we? We were the garbage.
You felt that way.
That's the way I felt. Nothing. Nobody. And
did you leave soon after that? Did you leave soon after that? Did you head back to?
We stayed there for about, and then the Russians came in. It was the Russians. It was in Sudetenland near Pilsen. The Russians came in, and the Americans were there. I remember one day I came in a tank in a little marketplace in this little city, and jumped out a man, a tall man, an American, and everybody liked the savior, absolute savior. He jumped out, and he had this slung over his gun, and everybody, and was staying a lot of the people, from there. There were so many people going. And he said, "Wer redt Deutsch?" So everybody yelled, me, and you recognize in this, "Wer redt Deutsch?" Though everybody is speaking German. So he says, "Ich bin a Jid from Bruk." So you could imagine. You could just imagine the scene there. This man broke down. He looked at us and he broke down. And he was holding his head. He didn't say a word. He was staying there, absolutely shocked. And then some other ones came out of the tank. Right away, started to tear open some food stores over there. They were locked, and started to give out food. And my brother-in-law didn't let me touch all these things. And I think he died a few years ago, my brother-in-law. But he saved me, because I would have grabbed anything, and I probably would have also died just from the too rich food to take something. We were staying there for about 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Where do you go? You go back where you were born. You went to lodge. Probably, maybe we'll find my mother looking, taking her away. The end of the war, you still believe, and you couldn't fathom it, that something like this happened. So we went back to lodge to look, and we were on a coal train going through Czechoslovakia into Poland, southern Poland into Lodz, and we came up one morning into Lodz, and it's a gray mist, and was raining, and when I came in before Lodz, it just cut into pieces. Didn't know what I'll find, and so on. We came up, got off this coal train, and we went in the city. After all, I knew the city. It was early morning. I thought, at least, when I came in, and I came in with a striped suit, I wouldn't go in and take anything from a German. A suit or a pair of shoes with my wooden shoes and my striped suit. I came in to lodge, and we are walking. I said, these people today, we are alive They're going to take us and carry us. This was my imagination. On the streets, on their hands, in Poland. We went into the city to call, where it was the center of of commerce, and we looked, and in Poland, one Yid recognized the other, and the slogan was Amchu. We looked like one look and said, Amchu? Yeah. And he sees me. He is already there a few months, because he was liberated in January or February or whatever. And he is already over there. I said, what's going on? Is there anybody to talk to? I said, yes, a Yiddish Gemeinde. There's on Shrubnieska, the street there. I go up, you'll find a lot. I went to Shrubnieska with my brother-in-law. And I stayed there. You had to register. A tumult of people. And I'm walking around like dazed. I thought that I'll come in, and they probably will take the band, the Philharmonic Orchestra, greet me. This was my imagination. After all, so much ill was done. About an hour, 2 hours later, one passes by and said, "You're Bruk," which was a very easy. I had the hair was still very short, but I'm a redhead, and I said, yes. He said, I think that you have here a sister. I heard. So they take me and my brother-in-law, and we come to a building. It's the wrong address. Nobody is there. Maybe it's another building. Go there, another building. Nobody is there. We go back to the Jewish community house there, to the Gemeinde. One comes over and says, "Where is Bruk? When did you come back?" You said, "This morning." "You have 2 Schwestern. You have 3 sisters. And I think you have 1 brother too." So I had the setback in the morning. I didn't believe that it is true now. Finally, they took me and my brother-in-law into a certain house, and sure enough, they opened the door, and they were there. They were there about already 3 or 4 weeks. They were liberated by the Russians, working in an ammunition factory in eastern Germany. To wind up this situation, the most amazing thing to me, and I'm pondering myself and the people I knew, and particularly the young who hadn't had a base yet. What is it that after being exposed to such cruelties and to such butchery, that when they were given the chance, they got out from the pit, from the bottom pit of humanity, raised themselves up, went forward, created for themselves, for the next fellow man, become decent people. They didn't go rob and banditry or anything, because this was the easiest thing at that time to do. They didn't. What is it?
What do you think?
Why?
What do you think it is?
I cannot give myself an answer. I am just marveling, and I'm absolutely amazed for years, because as early after the war, even, I forgot to tell you, I had in Germany, till I left. Why did I wind up in Canada? Because I registered to come to the United States, but there were quotas, and they didn't let you out. I would have gone anywhere, away from Europe, just from Europe, and I registered into Canada, so that the Canadian quota came over, and I was brought in by the Canadian Jewish Congress. So I said, I'll go there. And when I went on the boat, it was a military American boat, and the boat was delayed about an hour or 2, I almost went down and tried to push it away. I had such a desire to leave Europe. I had such an urge that nothing in this world that anybody could have offered me that I should stay in Europe in any country. I just wanted to get away. I had with a phobia, I believe, first of all, I was dreaming for quite a while about concentration camps. They're grabbing me again, and this is not the truth. For 2 or 3 years, I thought it's going to happen. They're going to grab me again. They're going to throw me in a jail or in a concentration camp. This is what my conviction. Until I came to Canada, and it took me maybe half a year, maybe a year, that I got out, that I saw there is a normal world, that nobody is going to hurt me unless I become something of a bad person or whatever, that I'll mind my own business. I worked. I came in a Thursday evening, September the 8th, 1948. I could have had from the Canadian Jewish Congress for 1 year money, clothing, and food, not to work. I went to work next morning, next Monday, at a social worker, Ms. Grunwald, I remember the name, and she said, you can do nothing and you'll get this and this and this, or you go to, I said, I want to go to work. I don't want anybody should pay me.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I don't want that anybody should do anything for me.
Yes.
I went to work to the singer company that got me a job in Montreal.
Oh, the same kind of
Yes.
material.
I asked me what profession I am.
Thank you so much for sharing this story.
Thank you.
It's just wonderful.
Wonderful.